Well, here we are again. And this is the story of Little Red Riding Hood. So, Joseph and Joshua, listen carefully because this is going to be a scary story about a big bad wolf and Little Red Riding Hood. Well, once upon a time, there was a little girl named Little Red Riding Hood, and she always wore a red jacket with a hood. And that's why they called her Little Red Riding Hood. And she lived with her mom on the edge of the forest. And one day, Little Red Riding Hood and her mother made special cookies for her grandmother, who lived deep in the forest. And they had heard that she was sick, and they also brought some soup for her. And so she had soup and cookies for for Grandma. And Little Red Riding Hood's mother said to her, "Now listen, you go to Grandma's house, but don't you stop along the way. You go straight to that house. You don't talk to anybody at all, especially if you happen to see the big bad wolf. Don't talk to him." So Little Red Riding Hood said, "Sure, I won't talk to him, and I'll go straight to Grandma's house, Mom." And so off she went. And Little Red Riding Hood was going along, and she came to a place in the road where there were two directions where she could go. And there was a sign that said "To Grandmother's House" on one side, and the other side was the hidden shortcut to Grandma's house. And she looked there for a second, and she heard something in the bushes. And she turned around, and there was the big bad wolf. Except he didn't. He pretended not to be the big bad wolf. And so he went up to Little Red Riding Hood and he said, "Hi, I'm the nice, kind wolf." And Little Red Riding Hood said, "Hi, how are you doing?" And "I am doing fine." And Little Red Riding Hood said, "Oh, I'm not supposed to talk to the big bad wolf, but this is the nice, kind wolf." And so she listened, and he said, "Where are you going, Little Red Riding Hood?" And Little Red Riding Hood said, "I'm going to my grandmother's house. She isn't feeling well, and we have special soup." It was chicken soup and cookies for Grandma. And the big bad wolf went, and he thought, "Ooh, I could eat up Little Red Riding Hood right now, eat her cookies, eat her soup, and then run to Grandma's house and get her because she's sick. She's not feeling well and she's in bed." And so he was starting to get ready to eat up Little Red Riding Hood, and then he heard something. It was the chopping of wood, and there were the lumberjacks, the woodsmen were out in the forest cutting down wood, cutting down trees. And the wolf went, "Oh, uh-oh, I better not try to eat her here, because if she yells, those lumberjacks, those woodsmen will hear her and they will come and get me." So he thought for a minute and he said, "Well, Little Red Riding Hood, you go on your way. I'm the nice, kind wolf." And he pointed her to the path that was the long path to Grandma's house where the sign was. And he said, "Well, I hope you have a good day, and give Grandma a hug for me." Well, Little Red Riding Hood said thank you, and she went along the long path to Grandma's house. And then the wolf took the other path that was the shortcut, and he ran real fast. And he got to Grandma's house before Little Red Riding Hood did. And he snuck inside. And he went up to Grandma. and she was asleep, fast asleep, because she was sick. And so the mean big bad wolf opened his big bad wolf mouth, and he swallowed Grandma whole. Oh, one giant gulp, and she went down his throat and into his tummy. And then he got his clothes for Grandma out of her closet. And when he went there and found the clothes in the closet, he put them on, so he pretended to be Grandma. And he got in her bed. In the meantime, Little Red Riding Hood came along. And she went in the house. And she said, "Hi, Grandma. It's Little Red Riding Hood." And the wolf in Grandma's clothes said, "Hello, Little Red Riding Hood." And Little Red Riding Hood went up to her and she said, Grandma, I brought you chicken noodle soup and special homemade cookies, chocolate chip cookies for you because you're sick, and these will help you get well. And Grandma, the wolf, said, "Oh, thank you, Little Red Riding Hood. You can leave those on the table." And so Little Red Riding Hood put them there. And then the wolf said, "Little Red Riding Hood, come over here so I can see you better." And Little Red Riding Hood went over and said, Grandma, you really must be sick. What big ears you have, Grandma." And the big bad wolf, pretending to be Grandma, said, "All the better to hear you with, my dear." And then Little Red Riding Hood looked, said, Grandma, what big eyes you have." And Big Bad Wolf said, "All the better to see you with, my dear." And then Little Red Riding Hood said, Grandma. And the wolf smiled. His teeth came down. Big, long wolf teeth. Little Red Riding Hood said, Grandma, what big teeth you have. And the wolf threw off the robe and said, "All the better to eat you with, my dear." And Little Red Riding Hood said, "I was going to give you a hug, but you're the big bad wolf." And Little Red Riding Hood started to run around screaming, "Help, help, help." And the big bad wolf tried to get her fast so that he could get her at one giant gulp. And in the meantime, the lumberjacks were working their way through the forest, and they took the shortcut route. And they heard about they heard the screaming and the yelling from Little Red Riding Hood, and they heard the wolf going, "I'm going to get you." The wolf couldn't move too fast because he had the grandma in his tummy. And the Little Red Riding Hood was running around, "Oh, no. And the wolf was going, "I'm going to all the better to eat you with, my dear." And then he looked up, and one of the lumberjacks came in, and he had a big axe with a sharp blade. And the wolf stopped and looked at the lumberjack, and the lumberjack looked at the wolf, and the lumberjack took the axe and went down the tummy of the wolf, and the wolf fell to the ground, and out popped Grandma from the cut open tummy. And she was so glad to see Little Red Riding Hood. She got away, and the wolf, no more wolf, gone, dead, skinned, and used as a rug. And Grandma was so happy, and she hugged Little Red Riding Hood, and Little Red Riding Hood hugged her, and said, I won't ever stop to talk to any wolves again, and I will obey my mother. And Grandma said, right. And the lumberjack said, well, I'm going to go cut some more wood. And they all lived happily ever after, except the big bad wolf. The end.